What really was the golden calf? Most Christians think they have the full answer to this question, but there is a key factor we've been missing all along. In my studies, I've come to learn what this is, and my goal is to bring it to you as well. While the correct answer isn't needed for salvation, not knowing it can cause you to easily fall into a similar trap within your own life. And this is something even many respected scholars have missed. The story takes place in Exodus 32. Moses had been up on Mount Sinai for what the Bible describes as 40 days and 40 nights in Exodus 24:18, and it was surrounded by a thick cloud representing the overwhelming glory of God. Fearing he had died, the people asked Aaron, his brother who'd been left in charge, to help. Aaron collected their golden earrings and melted them, using the metal to construct a golden bull for them to worship. Side fact, some scholars believe the use of the word calf was not to accurately describe this, but instead demean it as infantile. Ecstatic, they celebrated together under Aaron's poor leadership, dancing and feasting before the statue. And that's how Moses found them when he came down from the mountain. 2 tablets carrying the 10 Commandments in hand. God had told Moses his people had betrayed God with an idol, and Moses had to plead with God to spare their lives, then came down to see the damage. He was so angry, he threw the tablets to the ground and they broke, shattering into irrecoverable pieces. Later, he would receive new ones, but for now, he went down and ferociously judged the people, turning the calf into dust and making them drink it before having the still loyal Levites go through and kill all the ones who had led the people into idolatry. 3,000 fell. While it is true that the people disobeyed God, most teachers incorrectly assume this is a new deity, meaning one of 2 things. The first is that some people say new as in brand new, invented by the Israelites on the spot. This is false. While the Israelites were inarguably stupid at this moment, they weren't that stupid. This comes from a common misconception about what an idol was. The ancient peoples knew the carved images were not themselves gods. Rather, they saw them as conduits for gods. Doorways or portals through which the god could communicate, see, and potentially inhabit. The second alternative meaning is that they turned to a different, already established god. The most common name given is the Canaanite Baal or Baal, who was associated with the bull. Others think it may have been an Egyptian deity, for they came out of Egypt and Egypt worshipped the Apis bull. While leagues more plausible and honestly understandable than the previous theory. This too is actually incorrect. In truth, the deity this idol represented was God himself. There are 3 primary reasons to believe this. One is in the Hebrew text of the passage, one is in archaeology, and one is in the Hebraic alphabet itself. If you look at most English translations, you'll notice a peculiarity in the wording. Despite being a single statue, Aaron and the Israelites keep saying gods plural. It makes no linguistic sense given the subject matter. On top of it being one statue, they then hold a feast for God, solely and specifically, invoking the divine name just in case you got confused, as seen in Exodus 32:5. Despite all this, gods is in most popular translations. Why, you might ask? Well, the word used for gods is Elohim, the plural form of El, a singular god. However, Elohim, despite being plural, is also a common name for God in a multitude of occasions throughout the Old Testament, including later in this very passage. See Exodus 32:11. The verses, when changed to singular God, start making more sense given the singular idol constructed. Now, it's important we note that these instances of Elohim are translated to the plural form for a reason, just misguidedly so. Typically, translators look to the verbs around Elohim to gauge which version of it is being used. Exodus 32:1 does have a plural verb meaning they shall go immediately following it, the Hebrew word yelaku. However, this is the only time a plural companion word is used in this passage. Assuming this is not a scribal error, as we've not a manuscript copy of it being singular, people seem to have indeed been asking for multiple idols initially, ready to jump ship to other gods. Aaron, weak-willed but closer to God than the average Israelite, then sought to placate them while also attempting to stay true to Yahweh, and so made a single idol intended to be for him alone. But then why a bull of all things? Isn't that Baal? While this seems odd on its own, the greater cultural context discovered via archaeology puts things into an ordered perspective. For one, in the Near East at that time, bulls represented kingship, power, authority, and this is actually why they were associated with Baal. Archaeologists have also found several bull figurines at worship sites for God. It is now believed by most scholars that God was represented by a bull amongst the pagans. Not to mention, even today, a bull represents him among the Jews. However, this is not as an idol, merely a symbol. The Aleph, the first letter in the Hebrew alphabet, is seen as God's letter. The Aleph was originally a bull, and this tradition of being God's letter dates back to as far as they can remember, even showing up in the biblical text itself, which will be the topic of another video. Finally, think of the logic. Aaron knew full well who saved them from Egypt. While Israelites seem to have been an especially bipolar people, Aaron almost always comes off in scripture as measured, just not strong. It was a poor attempt by the high priest to keep his people's attention focused on his God. This suddenly puts 1 Kings 12:26-29 into a much clearer perspective. That was another passage which had always left me perplexed. The rebel king of northern Israel, Jeroboam, was worried that Judean king Rehoboam, the cruel son of Solomon, would be able to use Jerusalem's religious authority to consolidate power and depose him. So he made 2 golden calves, repeated the same words as Aaron, and set them at his northern and southern border. How does this plan make sense if what he feared was people going to Jerusalem to worship God? He just gives them some other half-baked god like Baal and hopes for the best? If his worry was the strength of the cult of Yahweh, this would not be his first step. Not unless he then persecuted those who followed God, which the Bible doesn't say when you'd expect it would. However, it all makes sense when one realizes these golden bulls were to represent God himself. Everything starts coming together. Jeroboam was trying to give the majority religion new worship centers within his own borders, greatly reducing the chances of them making a pilgrimage to Jerusalem by undercutting the one true temple. The writer condemned this with the parallel quote that probably wasn't actually what he said, but literally tied it to the original idol. The accumulation of this drastically changes the narrative. The entirety of the pre-existing lessons still apply, of course. God does not like idols. Do not worship anything other than God. And the Israelites seem to have initially given up on God altogether, as the story is often told. Yet, while here is where it usually ends, we continue on. Aaron tried to keep them loyal, except through worldly means that betrayed the God he was attempting to serve. He knew following God was the path to take, yet did not trust his power enough to follow his instructions. The Israelites worshipped the right God, but in the wrong way.